Good morning. My name is Scott Young, and I'm with Optrics Engineering. And of course, I've got Sean Sturby, our Technical Services Manager. Good morning, Sean.
Good morning, Scott.
Now, this is another edition of the Optrics Insider. We have our three topics as per normal. They are, first is hackers have figured out how to backdoor PHP. And that is huge, and we'll tell you why. Second is Samsung has come up with a 512 gigabyte memory chip, which is impressive. And number three is Acer has been hit by a $50 million ransomware attack, which is, from what I understand, the largest ransomware attack that we've seen so far. Let's talk about how hackers have figured out how to backdoor PHP.
Okay, so first of all, PHP is a programming language that is used on a lot of very popular sites, including if any site that uses WordPress. In fact, according to one statistic, 80% of all sites on the internet use some form of PHP. And so what happened is that the developers of PHP, the programming language, they have what is called a Git repository. It's just a repository of their programming. It's pretty standard when you have such a large group of people all collaborating together on a particular project. The idea is there that there's one central store of information, all the code, and if I was wanting to contribute to it, I would go in and I would check out a particular module. It would be downloaded to my computer so I could play around with it, add a new feature, whatever, and then I would submit it back to the central repository. So what happened is that over the weekend, hackers were able to get into that repository and post additional code that could have been a backdoor. Now, it didn't go live. It was just submitted. It still had to be approved and then committed. So it didn't go out, but if it was possible, if it had gone live, then this would have been, like you said, worse than SolarWinds. It's a what was SolarWinds called? Supply chain attack. Well, this is a similar idea. If they had managed to sneak it in silently, and then that change was approved and published, then once everybody updated their servers, which they're supposed to do on a regular basis, some computers do it nightly, then the backdoor would have allowed hackers access to 80% of all internet sites. And then they could have done anything that they wanted to it, including capture credit card information. So the intent, though, of this particular group of hackers was not to backdoor the programming language, but to show that there was a problem with this Git server. PHP has their own internal server, and then they mirror it or make a copy up to GitHub. So they've changed their policy going forward. They're reviewing their security stance. They are going to use the GitHub cloud as their primary, and then probably mirror it to their local, just so that they can, it's easier to manage and program things locally.
Sounds like then that this wasn't necessarily a malicious attack if it was more a proof of concept.
Correct, yes.
Was this potentially done as like an ethical hacking thing, like a penetration test, or just some random do-gooders who wanted to point out to PHP about a massive hole here?
We'll see when they actually put out the report as to what happened, but it sounds like it was more we found a problem and this is how we're letting you know.
That was nice of them. Not necessarily a bad news problem, but it could have been really bad if some bad actors took advantage of that. Interesting. All right. Let's talk about how Samsung has come up with a 512 gigabyte memory chip. That's pretty impressive.
It is. Over the weekend, I actually upgraded a relative, or the laptop, and we put in a 512 gigabyte solid state drive as a hard drive in their computer. They have 8 gigabytes of memory, but 512 gigabytes of storage. So what Samsung has done is they've come out with not just a 512 gigabyte memory chip or memory module, but it is called DDR5 or Dynamic Data Rate 5. It's faster. The standard was ratified only a year or two ago, and is twice as fast as the previous standard DDR4. So what's interesting about this is that a few years ago, when we talked about solid state drives, to get the capacity up in them, instead of spreading out larger and larger, they were taking and they were starting to stack like a cake, many different silicon layers. And they're using through silicon vias or interconnects, basically a way of wiring one layer of silicon to another layer. So instead of having to make a really broad module because it needs so much or so much area per transistor, they were able to make a layer cake of a couple of hundred layers. And then by using the very short through silicon vias to connect them all, that's made the path that the signal has to travel much shorter, which means that they can run much faster. I remember when I first started in computers, I was programming on a computer that had less than 1 megabyte of memory. In fact, the first Apple had 32 kilobytes of memory. And now we have one memory chip that's 512 gigabytes, many, many orders of magnitude larger. Wow. So this is primarily for the very large cloud hosters and for those people that are doing artificial intelligence, machine language, or machine learning. So that's going to be up at the very high end. And thankfully, that means that as they use up the bigger chips, that the smaller modules will end up coming down in price, and us poor guys that are using just regular desktops can get into maybe 128 gigabytes of memory.
Now, since the application is largely larger data centers who can afford such a chip, I'd say from a personal level, maybe wait for a bit because prices will come down, but something you probably can't afford at this point?
No, it's probably a case of if you have to ask how much it is, it's going to be way too much.
Well, so wait for a bit because this will come your way soon enough. All right, let's talk about our final topic of the day, where Acer was hit by a $50 million ransomware attack.
Yeah, so it's been reported by a couple of different sites, Bleeping Computers and Ziff Davis Net, that the Revil ransomware group has apparently hit Acer with a typical ransomware attack and are demanding the largest known ransom to date, $50 million. So it used to be that you would get hit by ransomware. It would encrypt your files, typically on one computer, and then you would be told, pay a couple, 3, 4, 5, 10 Bitcoin, which would be a reasonable amount of money, $300, $500, $1,000. Bitcoin prices have gone through the roof here recently, but it's also a case of the ransomware gangs doing their due diligence. When the ransomware gets installed, in addition to encrypting the files, it also will allow them access to those files so that they can go and poke around, maybe make a backup of those files on their own site, and then take a look through them and see, oh, based on the latest financials, yeah, we think you can afford a $50 million payout.
Just because you can afford it doesn't mean you want to. Yeah, and Thomas Cyber Insurance will include ransomware payout. So you want to check out your insurance policy to see what you're covered with. It's worth pointing out that if you don't want to be a victim of ransomware, there's a number of things that you can do. First off would be, you call it layer 8, which is the actual people within your organization, and train them what not to click, because a lot of these come in through emails and they click a link. I think you also pointed out earlier in a conversation that this could also come through social media links, different online chat features. There's so many different vectors. So really, if they know what not to click, if things look fishy, don't do it. I know as our staff, if something looks fishy, especially if it was something that we weren't expecting, we send it to you and you can give us the thumbs up or the thumbs down. But training that we recommend is KnowBe4 security awareness training, a well-known brand in the field. And if you want to learn more about that, I had a one-on-one conversation with Mike Brill from KnowBe4, which you can find in YouTube or one of our podcasts. So that's worth listening to. Another development outside of that is some vendors like WatchGuard, who own also Panda Software, is they've got endpoint security, like an antivirus that would sit on your computer that actually talks to the firewall. So if there's behavior that's going on where a link is triggered, it can actually talk to each other, analyze it, see it before it's executed, as well as if something with a specific computer is going on that's a bit sketchy, is it'll actually block it from the network, which is definitely worth looking at.
Limit what the infected computer can attack.
Exactly. And of course, also having good backups of your entire network so you can go back to a previous point where before the infection is also something that's worth exploring. So if that's something that you do want to explore, of course, you can reach out through us through optrics.com as our website. We have a contact form there, and you can talk to Sean and he can listen to your specific situation and be able to make some good recommendations on what you can do to protect your network. And if you do get hacked, we also partner with some companies who can do a penetration test or help you get that sorted out. So anything else you want to add on that point, or do you think I covered it?
You covered it very well, Scott.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Let's review our three topics. We talked about how hackers have figured out how to backdoor PHP, although it sounds like it was more researchers who pointed out a big flaw there before it could really cause some damage. Samsung has come up with a 512 gigabit or byte,
Right.
thank you, memory chip, and Acer was hit with a $50 million ransomware attack and how they were dealing with that. Plus, we provide some suggestions on what you can do so you weren't a victim.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you, Sean, for your time. Lots of interesting things out there as always. Of course, if you enjoyed today's episode, please like, share, and subscribe, as well as leave a comment below. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.
In the future.
Yeah,
Bye.
sometime in the future. Bye.